First, his comments opposing women in combat, many of whom are decorated and have acquitted themselves very well. With his own sexual assault allegations, there's a concern that it would halt or reverse progress that we have made addressing sexual assault in the military and creating an environment less hostile to women in the military. But I'm also hearing concerns about his drinking and the fact that you need to be sure that you have someone who will decide whether we attack someone or who could decide to what extent nuclear weapons could be used, having the presence of mind and not being impaired, and there are concerns about Mr. Hegseth in all of those areas.
The Senator, Congresswoman, wrote about the message that it would send. I remain concerned about the message confirming Mr. Hegseth sends to women currently serving and those aspiring to join. And that's the part that I want to ask you about, what that might mean in your view for recruitment, for attracting new talent in a massive Navy hub like Norfolk.
I would say, and I have been saying since he was first announced, that his appointment would have a chilling effect on attracting and retaining the best and the brightest in our armed forces, women, also minorities, and making sure we have done a really good job making sure that our armed forces reflect the diversity of the country that they defend. And we've had challenges meeting some of our recruitment goals for a wide variety of reasons, and Mr. Hegseth would add to those problems if he were confirmed.
Well, so as you speak to the reflection of the country the U.S. military is defending, what do you make of the unwind of DEI programs across the federal government as of last night, but the Pentagon included?
I'm very concerned about it. I mean, these go so far as to even to rescind a 1965 executive order from President Johnson that applies to contractors, federal government contractors. That includes contractors that serve our military, contractors that build our warships, and it basically means now there's nothing prohibiting them by executive order from engaging in discrimination against employees simply for who they are. It's appalling and undoes so much progress that we have made over the past 60 years.
Well, Congresswoman, our viewers and listeners are going to get a good sense here of how important your district is and some of the issues that we're talking about. As Kayleigh mentioned, Virginia's 4th district, that DEI undoing, if you will, and we understand now, according to reports, that the administration is actually asking federal workers to rat each other out if there are DEI processes left in place. It's going to end up with a lot of layoffs. You have a lot of federal workers in the state of Virginia. You also have a lot of veterans, and this could impact some veterans programs as well with the undoing of DEI. When you put that all together, what's the net effect? How many people could lose their jobs?
Well, we have over 200,000 federal employees and contractors and over 140,000 veterans. It's already having an effect. The VA hospital in my district had a meeting yesterday to talk about how it was going to impact their ability to provide services to veterans. They were about to open a new VA hospital in Fredericksburg, Virginia, less than 30 minutes away from my district. Now they're not sure they can do that because they can't hire the staff to staff it. We've seen VA hospitals in other states that have rescinded employment offers to nurses. We already have a nursing shortage. We are already struggling to meet the healthcare needs of our veterans. This is going to make it worse. The VA is concerned they're going to have to start sending veterans to hospitals, in civilian hospitals in the region. They are already struggling with nurse and provider shortages. This is a mess. And this is not what the American people voted for when they voted for Donald Trump. They thought they were voting to reduce costs. Instead, he is burdening our veterans, he is burdening our soldiers, and he is burdening our military families.
Well, we really appreciate your insight into these matters, Congresswoman, as we consider as well where this administration is now sending our soldiers with the deployment of troops to the U.S. border. Do you see this as an appropriate use of the military, considering he has declared an emergency?
Well, what we need to do and what Democrats were ready to do with Republicans last Congress was pass an immigration border security bill that invests in Border Patrol agents and put them on the border so that our armed forces can do the job they were trained for, and that is to serve our needs both here in bases but also overseas.
What are you concerned about as we consider the impact in your district that changes to military policy would have here when it comes to climate, when it comes to resources, shipbuilding, et cetera? This is something that Donald Trump has talked about a lot when it comes to the proposed purchase of U.S. steel. Is that a conversation that you'll be part of, considering your district and your constituency on Capitol Hill?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, first of all, as a member of the Armed Services Committee in the last Congress, when I went to Norfolk Naval Station and asked their commanding officer, what is the number one thing that keeps you up at night? She talked about the fact that when they have heavy rains, not just increased storms and higher intensity storms, but heavy rains, there is a street that bisects that naval station that floods, and she can't get her people from one side to the other. How is she going to be able to deploy ships in an emergency or when they are deployed if she can't get across the base because it's flooded? And by rolling back all of the efforts that we have made to address resiliency and climate action, particularly in the Navy, in the armed services, what the president is doing is ignoring the impact that climate change has on military readiness and on our soldiers' ability to do their job and, frankly, their quality of life.
As we consider climate change, Congresswoman, of course, we all have our eyes on the West Coast with fires still raging in the Los Angeles area. And I'm sure you're well aware that there are colleagues of yours in the House on the Republican side who are suggesting any emergency aid for LA should be conditioned and that it could be leveraged to get Democratic votes on other matters like raising the debt ceiling, for example. Where do you come down on that?
This is a Rubicon Republicans should not cross. The American people expect their government to solve problems and help people, particularly when there is a natural disaster. There are people in California that voted for Mr. Trump. There are people in California that voted for Kamala Harris. There are people in California that did not vote at all. But they all expect their government to help them in an emergency. And we have never conditioned aid in a natural disaster. And there's so much misinformation that they're even using to justify these conditions, but they're ignoring the fact that it is difficult to fight a fire in hurricane force winds. So we need to make sure we're doing everything we can in California and North Carolina and anywhere else to address the needs of the American people, especially in a natural disaster.
Well, so how do you work against mis and disinformation, whether it's in Asheville, and we heard a lot about that when FEMA showed up following the hurricanes, or now in California where Donald Trump says Gavin Newsom only has to turn a valve, that he's refusing to provide water to Los Angeles. A lot of people are going to believe that. Donald Trump's on his way there tomorrow, Congresswoman.
Well, I think we need to make sure that all of us, this is an all hands on deck moment. It's me as an elected official, it's you as a member of the press, making sure we are calling out this misinformation and that we are countering it, but in every medium where people will receive their information. And so that's what we need to make sure we are doubling down and being more aggressive. Whether you get your information from social media, your neighbor next door, we've got to make sure that we're giving you the truth.